it up all the way. You got, I'm just soft closing. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for being here. My name is Uzumako Saneka. I'm a proud member of the Touch team. I work on our international programs. One that you'll hear about today is a huge blessing to be a part of. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your participation today. We hope that you feel enlightened. We hope that maybe you learned something new today. We hope that you walk away maybe feeling like you can do something different in the world and approach your work differently. We have some wonderful speakers today, and we also have some virtual speakers. Sorry, please go down. I'm going to hand it over to Ricky, our amazing leader.
We're so glad you're here. Thank you so much. I know it was a lot. You came in a day early, and we're so grateful for you being here with us. So actually, the first slide, can you change the slide? Everyone keeps asking me about my new baby, so so yeah, Haley delivered on October 4th. We had our first sleepover in my house on Friday. Just leave it to us. Yeah, she was 2 weeks early, 7 4 through 12 pounds out. Here's about food and bottle. So today, I want you guys to close your eyes for a second. Close your eyes for a second. And think about the world. So you live in your space, right? You live in your unique space. You live in your house with your family. You have your job, that we all do this job with such love, you know, we're all in this work together. And but you have confines around you. So think about what things are constraining you, right? Are you thinking about the woman that just called today with a new diagnosis? Are you thinking about a new drug that you're working on? Are you thinking about someone you just met that's new to this space that you want to learn from? So I want you to think bigger than that. So you're on this ladder. So right now you're on the bottom rung of the ladder. Take 3 steps up the ladder. Now open your eyes. What do you see? What do you see around you? What changed in the world? What changed in your thinking? When you just step up the ladder, 3 steps, 3 rungs up the ladder. Do you see anything bigger? Do you see anything beyond your current situation, your current job, your current world, what you're currently working in? So we want to take you there today. We want to take you to a bigger space that you may not be thinking about. And we've started to think about because of our dear sister, Melissa Davis, who brought us into this global space, and France, who brought us into this global space. But we want to take you to what breast cancer looks like around the world. And it sucks. It's like, we see what we see in the States, we see the disparities in the States, but a lot of the knowledge that we need is going to come, maybe not from here, maybe not from the current box that we're in, but from someplace else. So somebody going to change the slide for me? Down. We're going to show you a video of some work that we're doing, but
survival of breast cancer in high income countries. That plummets to 40% and 32% in Nigeria. Many women simply cannot afford it. In fact, they act as an afford. Black women should not lose their lives simply because of the color of their skin. Nobody should lose their lives.
That's excerpt from a film that our friend Victoria. Which is an amazing documentary that you'll hear more soon. So the data across the world is really crazy. Breast cancer is just a horrible disease, especially in low-income countries. We're going to show you some of the numbers. It's really a crisis, a global crisis that we don't think enough people are paying attention to, right? And we can kind of solve for it in the States, but it's not going to happen unless we can hear some of the numbers. So basically, there are 2.3 million new cases of breast cancer in the world, just from 2022, 700,000 deaths, and 10.7% of these cases are women under 40. So we're seeing those trends in the US. You know, in the US, women under 35 get breast cancer at twice the rate of white women and die at 3 times the rate. But that's happening across the globe, across all the races, right? And unless we change the game, breast cancer is expected to increase to 3.3 billion cases in a couple of years, right? By 2040, that's not too far away, right? Seems like it is, but it's not. And a third of those are going to be deaths. So what's going to happen between now and then, right? Also, if you look at just the economic impact of breast cancer globally, the cost of it, $2 trillion. So what is that money being used for? Is that the cost of care? Is that the cost of drugs? Is that the cost of what? But that industry is huge and it shouldn't get bigger. You know, I want to put myself out of a job. I want to put all of this out of a job, right? So how that? Can you go to the next slide? We just pulled some of the neighbors with numbers just to show you the crisis, right? So in the US, Black women have a 40% higher mortality rate. That number really hasn't changed. It goes between 40, 41, 42 over the past, whatever, 14 years I've been doing this work, right? It hasn't changed. Next slide. But in regions of sub-Saharan Africa, horrible survival rate. So survival rate's lower. They're getting diagnosed at later stages and a lot of triple negative. And a lot of the data we get even from Africa, we don't really have good numbers because they don't have good registries. They don't have any that measures the incidence and mortality the way that we do in the States. Next slide. African women are likely to be diagnosed at late stages. And it's really just fatal. But they, you know, there's a lot of bias around what a diagnosis is like. There are a lot of cultural issues like if I tell somebody I have cancer, they're never going to talk to me again. My family's not going to talk to me. I'm going to be shunned from my village. I won't be able to go home. My husband's going to get a new wife. So I don't want to do anything. Next slide. And again, to the numbers in high income countries, the numbers are really just devastating. And you guys can read these numbers in terms of what it looks like in terms of incidence and mortality, and just even the care people get overseas. So a few years ago, before really I started Touch, I started talking about Black breast cancer. And people kept saying, oh, Ricky, you're crazy. There's no such thing as Black breast cancer. Breast cancer is all the same. You know, a lot of Black women get triple negative, but there's no such thing as Black breast cancer. And I kept forcing the conversation, and even the Black women were telling me to shut up. And so, but I kept saying, something is wrong. Something is wrong. Why are Black women dying? Why do we have a 40% higher mortality rate? Why are we getting it younger? Like, what's wrong with this picture? So I got a bunch of our docs together and helped me write this definition. And I'm going to read it to you because we still live by it. Black breast cancer is the constellation of exposures, experiences, and lack of science for Black women diagnosed with breast cancer that causes us to face disproportionately worse breast cancer outcomes. But it's all of these factors. People always sort of want to blame it on the social determinants of health, and we're now seeing that's more than that. Next slide. So what does this look like? On this side of the page is a Black triple negative breast cancer cell. On that side of the page is a white one. What do you see? They look alike? This is from one of our researchers on our soundbite project, which Melissa is going to talk about, from the Guy Cancer Center in London. And this is the research that this wonderful scientist, Shiva Urshad. So who are we making drugs for right now? 3% participation in clinical trials for Black women. So why are the Black women dying? It's not rocket science. I am not a scientist. I got one over here to talk to you about it. But something's wrong with this picture. And unless we acknowledge this and look at this and put it in the labs and get more Black women into clinical trials, keep dying, right? So why is it taking me, the non-scientist, to bring this to people's attention, right? Well, Melissa's been doing it for years. You'll hear her story, but this is what's going on in our world right now. Next slide. Our physiology has just not been a concern. And I wouldn't even use the word concern, but it's not being acknowledged, recognized, and planned for, right? We've got 3% participation in clinical trials. We're not getting biomarker testing, but frankly, our science right now does not reflect the burden of disease. It doesn't, and we have to change that. We have to change that. And I don't need to change it in my lifetime. So how much time? Look at Africa. Africa's the home to 19% of the world's population, but 25% of the burden of disease. How many clinical trials are done in Africa? 1%. And where are they done in Africa? South Africa, where the white people are, right? So we're missing this audience, this burden of disease, a place where people are sick, to do the research that we need to get the drugs that we need to help Black women. There's another little video. Our friend Nana from Kenya. Forget the beginning.
So, hello everyone, my name is Nana Keleni. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I'm 3 years in remission now. I've been run an organization in Nairobi called Indian Cancer Health Initiative, but before I go there, I want to tell you that I was diagnosed with breast cancer in August 2022, but then I did not get that diagnosis in August 2022. It took me time for 2 years. I felt a lump in 2020, and I was extremely sick for 2 years. I stayed at home with a lump because I was really, really straining financially. I didn't have the money to go to hospital, and I was very scared also to be told that I had cancer. And with time, I got sick. My body was really shutting down. And then 1st of August, my breast tethered or dimpled. The doctors call it tethering. So when I went to hospital, my sister took me to hospital with the whole cover, medical cover. And that is when my journey started. It has been a very long, hectic journey, but I thank God I was treated here at home. Now on the mission. I'm running this great organization, the Cancer Health Initiative, where we help the poor, vulnerable patients to pay for their universal health cover, we give them food, we pay for their biopsies. We have this small program for survivorship it's called survivorship program. Yeah, to help them start their lives again. And we also giving women prostheses. breast prosthesis, mastectomy bras, so that they can start their life again. And now we want to start a cancer rescue center so that women who are really struggling financially to go for diagnosis like me can come seek help so that they are able to be treated on time, so that they don't waste a lot of time due to lack of finances at home. Because I wasted a whole 2 years. That is why my cancer got to stage 3. So I'm very, very grateful to meet Ricky, and I'm proudly now associated. Let's keep doing this for the honor and glory to God. Thank you.
She waited 2 years to get treatment because she was scared, because cancer means death, and she didn't have any money. And her sister basically gave her, they lied and used her sister's health insurance so she could get care. Because that's the only way she could do it, because her sister had health insurance through her job. So they just gave her, she just sort of gifted it to her. But that's what's happening. And she now has an organization called the Needy Health Initiative. But literally, Cruz and I went to her house 2 weeks ago, and she had a woman living in her house. She had just helped a man with prostate cancer. He lived with her for 8 months. And she took care of him. She had a caregiver come in her house and she took care of him. And now she's taking care of another woman who has triple negative. But that's what's happening, because she took it upon herself to just take care of people. But we have to do a better job for her. We have to do a better job for women. So now I'm going to introduce our illustrious panel. If you guys want to come up, are you done eating? And actually, Lauren is not here today. Lauren's mom's pretty ill, so we have a video of her. But Melissa Davis and Corinne from Know Your Lemon and Franz Dude. And these are my precious, precious friends that we've been doing this global work with. And they've changed my life forever and how I look at breast cancer. So you guys want to introduce yourselves and then we'll let you talk.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Davis. I'm currently the inaugural director of the Institute for Translational Genomic Medicine at Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm also team lead for a Cancer Grand Challenge called Team Standby, for which I kind of drug Ricky along in, and that's what she was giving you guys a little snapshot of. I'll tell you more later. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Corinne. I'm the CEO and founder of the Know Your Lemons Foundation. My background is in graphic design. So my PhD is how can you educate patients in a visual way that makes it easier to overcome health disparities and fear and all of those things that hold us back from talking about breast cancer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Franz today, and I'm with AstraZeneca. I work in our global oncology policy and advocacy for breast cancer. I've been with AstraZeneca for a little over 9 years now, originally from Canada. So you might hear a little accent, but I don't. I started as a pharmacist, but now totally dedicated to policy and advocacy for breast cancer. And I look forward to talking to you about the work that we're doing and how we're connected to Ricky.
Right. What do you want to go first? What would you like?
Sure.
Want to stand stick?
Maybe you want me to do it? Light here.
I know, it's not right. Come stand over here.
No, I like this one.
Oh, you're okay.
I gotta turn the mic off.
Hello.
All right, so first, just a quick story about how I met Ricky. When she was trying to define or give that definition of Black breast cancer, I was a member of her advisory board, and all of a sudden I got this phone call. It was kind of frantic. She was like, "Can you join me on this Zoom?" This was like, I think it was maybe during COVID, because for some reason I was working in my bed. Remember, I was sitting on my bed. And I said, okay. And she said, yeah, I want you to tell these people that Black breast cancer is a real thing. I said, okay. And so we got on the call and lo and behold, it's like these two illustrious scientists, probably at some Ivy League institution. I was like, oh God, okay. And they were busy trying to tell her that, well, Ricky, you can't call it Black breast cancer. You know, this is just not a term that's acceptable in the scientific world. You know, you can't really define breast cancer by race and ethnicity. And I was like, well, actually, we have some data that actually indicate that at a population level, there are distinctions in the tumor biology that's actually associated with the genetic background of individual international populations. And they were like, oh, well, could you share that? And that started our journey. And so SABCS stands for Societal Ancestry and Molecular Biology Analysis of Inequities. It's a Cancer Grand Challenge award, which is a team science award. It's $25 million award that I have to split across 5 countries, 15 different investigators. This lens that you see is representative of all of the different disciplines, and the investigators who are a part of each one of those teams are world-leading scientists who have developed specific types of methodologies that focus on some aspect of their discipline. But what we've asked them to do is focus it on disparities, and particularly in the African diaspora. Okay. Feel bad having me so do this. So this cross-disciplinary is integral to really identify what the causes of disparities are to move forward. When we look at some of the statistics or in the history of research in this area, one of the things that we've noticed, you know, I started this trek about 16, 17 years ago in my career. Things that we noticed was that the majority of the data that existed was really harnessing information about social determinants of health, socioeconomic status. But we recognize as molecular biologists and geneticists, and I'm trained in functional genomics, so I think really deeply about genes and DNA and cells, and works that started in my postdoc with Romeo Lupade really illuminated to me that there could be distinctions related to genetic ancestry. And so instead of walking these two sort of bipolar paths of, is it race or racism, or is it biology and genetic predisposition? How about it's probably a combination of all of those things. And so that was the premise of our Cancer Grand Challenge. Here, I'm gonna do it. I just want to skip through a lot of this is some animation. And I feel like I'm gonna be saying next slide, next slide. Thank you though, Uzo. Enjoy your lunch. Okay, so what I'm showing here is a map of poverty, and covering it now, but a map of where African Americans live in the United States. And so clearly there's a sort of correlation to where marginalized populations and socioeconomic status and poverty. But we actually know that poverty and socioeconomic status does not play as large a role as tumor characteristics, and that's what this graph is. In fact, one of those tumor characteristics is hormone receptor status. Triple negative breast cancer occurs twice as likely in African Americans. But from a global perspective, and this is what I started work when I was the scientific director of the International Center for the Study of Breast Cancer Subtypes at Weill Cornell and New York Presbyterian hospitals, is that at a global level, we see the highest rates of triple negative breast cancer in sub-Saharan Africa. And then in every population around the world, we can separate the population by whether people are Black or African. That particular component of the population has the highest rate of triple negative breast cancer. We measured ancestry, in fact, and genetic ancestry. West African genetic ancestry has a statistical association with triple negative compared to all other types of cancer. So I usually at this point will point out that genetic ancestry is like a kaleidoscope across your chromosomes. So just saying that the more African ancestry you have really is an indicator that the more likely you are to have some specific allele, a gene version that's in that genetic background that's leading down the molecular pathway of triple negative breast cancer. The figures on the right represent chromosomes. Remember, this is biology 101, so we have 22 chromosomes. And each one of those is painted with the genetic ancestry of those two different individuals. And no two people have the same fingerprint of their genetic average. And so what we do is harness that information, first of all, to improve some of the statistics. We heard Ricky mention that Africa represents a certain proportion of the world, but our data is minuscule in comparison. So 95% of the data that we have in genetics and genomics is from the European diaspora, if you will. So that's like that global graph that you see, that bar graph with the red, blue, green, purple. So that red represents that 20% of the world that Europeans represent, and yet at 95% is their data. And that other 20% that represents African ancestry is represented by 3% of the data. So 3 to 5% represent 80% of the world. And that's why we have this disparity of even understanding with clinical tools what some of these different gene variants are in that genetic background. So in our teams, and there are 5 of them as a part of that lens, all of these different investigators that you see here are focused on social determinants of health, and Laura McCullough, who you will hear from here shortly, co-leads that social determinants team. We have a team that's focused on environmental exposures and exposomics, because everything has to be omics these days. And then we have genomics and epigenomics, which just means all of the things, okay? Omics tacked on the end of a word just means we're trying to capture as much of and all of that particular focus in the data. And then the last work package that generates data is work package 4, which is our immunology and tumor microenvironment. But the key work package that I want to talk about today, of course, is work package 5, which is the patient partnership and advocacy. Now, I had to fight a little bit with Cancer Grant Challenges to get a budget for their advocacy work, because typically, even though we had to have a patient advocate representing our team, they told us that they don't typically pay the advocates. And I said, well, my advocates are going to be working pretty hard, because they'll actually have to go out into the community, they'll be collecting data, I'm embedding them in each one of our scientific work packages. They need a budget, and so we successfully got this funded so that Ricky could have a budget to do some of the work that we're going to highlight. These are her goals, which honestly, when I asked her, I said, oh, it's a little thing I want you to help me with. Then it turned out to be this huge, like 5-year endeavor. So she forgives me, but I think I owe her probably a house by now. So I'm not going to go through each one of these steps, but I will say that the work that we're doing is designed to be coexisting data. And so this will be the first time that we have over 40,000 participants, 80% of them being of African ancestry, where we have clear social determinants of health at the area and individual level. We're going to layer on top of that the exposomics, which is down to the atomic structure of the molecules that are circulating in their plasma. Then on top of that, we'll sequence their entire genome from end to end of every chromosome. That is controversial. And then on top of that, we'll be looking specifically at some of the cellular context of their tumors. And some of the stuff that we've already discovered are that psychosocial health and breast cancer is not well understood in Black populations. Okay, so the social determinants team is busy working on specific surveys to capture the lived experience of these particular patient populations across all of our catchment. In the tumor immune microenvironment, one of the things we've learned is that people of African ancestry have a huge immune response. That's what you saw in that image that Ricky showed you. So the lymph node of the Black patient versus the lymph node of the white patient, the distinctions there are inflammation and an influx of immune cells. But unfortunately, we don't have a survival advantage from the influx of our immune cells. So in that top panel on the right, what you see at the top is an African-American with triple-negative breast cancer, a Ghanaian with breast cancer, and those Black and blue cells are the immune cells. And then at the bottom, you see an Ethiopian African woman with triple-negative and a European American. And you can see there's a stark contrast here in the count of just immune cells in their tumors. So now the question is, well, why don't they have a better overall survival? Here, what I'm showing you is with that high count of tumor-associated leukocytes, the red line, Black patients and West African patients have no survival advantage from their immune cells. And so that tells us that there's some distinction in how the immune cells are functioning, and that there must be some suppressive feature in their system. And one of those features is what they've been exposed to. So in New York, what we've done is shown with the Breast Cancer Research Foundation grant is if patients live in redlined, historically redlined areas, which typically are deprived environments, which also means they don't have great food security, water security, they're going to be exposed to a lot more pollution. They have a specific signature on their tumors that indicate that there's something in their environment that's driving a mutational process. And that's just in like Brooklyn. So imagine what we may find when we look in some of our African nations where they have unregulated mining, coal, oil refineries, other things in terms of not having secure water sources, pesticides from agriculture. All of that becomes a part of the sphere of what a patient actually endures, right? So before the cancer ever starts, there's an entire history of where they live, where they work, stress that they've had to endure and continue to endure. And we don't really consider those things in the course of clinical care. When a patient comes in with a tumor, we assess the tumor, we assess biomarkers on the tumor, and then we find the drugs that cure them of the tumor. But then we send them right back into the environment that caused the tumor without any additional information about how to prevent this from happening later on in life and in their families who are also enduring the same environment and the same lived experience. And so working with patient advocates, what we hope to do is start to translate a lot of this really high level science into plain language. And so one of the key deliverables from Ricky's team is translating every scientific paper into a plain language paper that we deliver back to not only the people who enrolled in SAMBI, but their communities in general to help them understand what are the factors that we've identified that they should be aware of, and then how can we help them mitigate some of those influences that gave them those diagnoses. I want to just end on saying that, barriers tend to follow marginalized populations in many ways. It's sort of a shared experience of marginalization. But the way it translates in different communities could all be, treated, if you will, or intervened with some of the same tools. One of those tools is social networks. Ricky came with us to Kenya, but before we went to Kenya, we also went to Nigeria earlier this year. And we hear some of the same heartbreaking stories of patients when they get a diagnosis of cancer. Either, they identify ways of getting treatment, or they have no recourse at all. And if they have no recourse at all, they make a conscious decision that I'm just going to die. And sometimes their family makes that decision for them. And this is that isolation that we're talking about, where they even make the decision that because we know you're going to die, we're cutting you off from food sources, we're cutting you off from our village, we're cutting you off from the family, because we want to protect our children from witnessing death. And so all of those sort of decisions can be flipped around if we just raise the capacity of their ability to treat and get access to care. And some of it is, like low-hanging fruit. Like one of the things that I learned at this trip in Kenya, and I'll stop here, was that some of the treatments that we pay $500,000 for, maybe 70, right? A biomarker test that may cost you $5,000 is less than $25 to $30. And they just don't even have the capacity. So lo and behold, one of the
goals that I have is to ensure that at the very least, some of the basic science, some of the basic clinical first steps that we do just systematically here is something that we can enable them to do for themselves at many of our African sites. And I'll stop there. Also, just want to say thank you for having me today.
You can like, even Nana, Herman, me, cost $1,000. She couldn't afford it. I called with my $500,000 booth. Right? How much did your booth cost? Right? So $1,000. Couldn't afford it. She waited 2 years. So. Corinne, you ready? Who's next? Mm-hmm. She hasn't worked back. I know, she actually emailed me yesterday, said, does everybody have slides? I said, well, nobody sent me slides, but I know Melissa.
Gotta find the right stand.
She just had.
It's just a short video. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm just going to share a little bit about my background and how this came to be. When I was 20, I was starting my master's degree in graphic design when I lost my grandmother to breast cancer. And she was actually my second grandmother that I lost to breast cancer. And so that started to get me thinking, wait, am I at risk for breast cancer? I'm in my 20s, like, when should I start getting screens? They say, like, you should check for lumps. Like, what does that mean? You know, because I felt my breast before and there were lumps in there. And I'm like, I don't understand this. And, you know, in school, we talk about every part of the body except for breasts. You know, like, I know the dangers of steroid use and testicle shrinkage. I'm not sure that was like essential for like my education growing up, but like the school made sure I knew about that, right? Yet breast cancer today is the most common cancer in the world. We don't talk. And one of the reasons why we don't talk about it is because of all the stigma and fear that surrounds breasts and cancer. And so breasts are often associated with sex, and cancer is often associated with death. So basically, we're talking about sex death. And we're like, hey kids, let's talk about sex death. And I'm like, no. Hey parents, do you want to talk to your kids about sex death? No, right? And then we don't like get together with our girlfriends for lunch and say, hey, I'm really interested in talking about breast cancer. Have you guys heard about the latest things happening in breast cancer? Like, it's a topic we don't know how to bring up. And so because of that, we don't. And we wait until there's a problem, usually before we learn about breast health. And that's too late in a lot of cases. So my journey started with, I'm a designer. Is there a better way to design this that can make it interesting so it doesn't require 2 family members dying before people start to investigate this? So I started that journey over 25 years ago. 10 years ago, left my job as a business professor in London to use my savings to start this charity with this wild idea of using lemons as a way to bring up the topic of breast cancer so more people could get educated about symptoms. So I want to show you this video that gives you an overview of the global work that we do, and then I'll share some story how we're educating in different parts of the world.
Know your lemons in rural villages all across Sarawak Borneo. Most of them are more confident when doing breast examination now, and they know the top signs and symptoms to look out for. I know that I am making a difference to close the gap to late detection.
I saw the poster and looked at one of their symptoms, which happened to be the dimple in the lemon. That actually was on how to my post. That poster you had created has quite literally saved my life.
I wish I had the absolute amount that would have prompted me to regular monthly breast exams, which are I don't know, I didn't do that often. Posters need to be in the GP's room. So they are familiarising themselves constantly with these things and recognising what is an urgent referral.
But since now they have the education, it means now they come with the lump. The stage is lower. Instead of stage 4, now we can go.
Okay, great. So. Let's watch it again. So today we are in 77 countries with 1,400 volunteer educators that have been trained. And our campaign is in 42 languages. So far, we have reached 2 billion people through our online campaign on a budget of 6 trillion. Just kidding. And really what we're doing is how do we help start these conversations? And so specifically talking about Africa, I can tell you about some of the work that's been done with our partners in the campaign and some of the issues that we're trying to tackle. One of our partners that you saw speaking there at the very end, they're in Tanzania, and they provide medical care services. And what they do is they train teenagers, and they call it Teens for Teens, as a Lebanista. And they go to schools and they train other teens in how to do self-exam, how to identify symptoms, and what to do if you notice that. And what they're doing is they're explaining this is what cancer is. And then they go home and they have those conversations with their families. And they said in 18 months, they started noticing a difference in when women started presenting symptoms. They said they used to present a symptom when the breast was fungated and very bad odor, and they were presenting at stage 4. And they said in the last 18 months, we've had 12 women coming with lumps, and we've been able to put them all into treatment instead of hospice. And they're like, that is all the difference in being able to have women get to us with a lump. And so when we're working with a healthcare partner that's providing treatment and services for the community that we serve, that's so effective in being able to add that piece of educational outreach to that program and doing it through familiar voices of family. We're also starting some work with the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they have really big ambitions to create 5 cancer centers in the next several years. And so they came to us and said, we want to do Know Your Lemons across all 26 provinces in DRC because we want to save all these women. I said, this is fantastic. We'd love to work with you. How many mammogram machines do you have in the country? 5. Might be a little tricky to diagnose some things. Okay, great. How many CT machines do you have? How many pathologists? None. Right. So with the WHO's Global Breast Cancer Initiative, what they've done is they've divided this work into 3 pieces of how we can tackle deaths from breast cancer. So the first pillar is patient advocacy and education. So how do we do health promotion? That's pillar 1. Pillar 2 is diagnostics and testing. Pillar 3 is treatment and survivorship. So if we're doing all this work in education, we can educate all these women. Hey, here are the symptoms. Here's what you do. And if they have no way of getting into that test, like what are we doing, right? So we're working with them on how can we work with the local populations around the equipment that currently exists. How do we get rid of the financial barriers for testing? How do we get rid of the concerns about what happens to my life if I start to investigate this health issue, right? Working with the religious ministers and things like that, and identifying what are the things that are blocking that navigational piece and how can we help support that navigation. So we're looking at ways that we can support have that education navigational piece that's getting them to pillar 2. Then someone else will come along who really cares about pillar 2, figure out, well, here's how we get the testing in and here's how we do this. And, you know, someday we need a better test than a mammogram. Because mammogram machines are so expensive, the maintenance is so much, the technical expertise, all of that, and it's not really built for low to middle income country infrastructures to work with that. So really interesting research is being done in lots of different areas. We're really interested to see what happens with that, particularly with these blood cancer tests that are starting to show a bit more promise in different areas. But you know, looking at how do we educate, but also support what's happening in the community. So another example was a woman in Kenya was walking down the street and saw one of our Lemonistas out educating the community, and she saw the lemons picture. So in most parts of Africa, lemons are green. So you might have noticed in that video, there's a poster where they're pointing to green lemons. And that's because we adapt for that. And so she sees the lemons and she says, wait, that's what I have. And she's like, can you help me? And they're like, yes. They helped her get into testing and she was able to get diagnosed and to get treatment. But the reason why she was wandering in this village is because she had been kicked out by her community because they thought that it was a result of something bad that she had done, and that it was going to, that curse was going to spread throughout the village because they don't know what cancer is. So the Lemonistas were able to go into the village because we use lemons. It's not sexy. It's not something that you need to censor. It's friendly. We're not talking about cancer. We're talking about, look at these lemons. And then we're going to teach you something. So it makes it really easy to teach men, children, women, everybody in this really non-confrontational, friendly way. And they were able to go back to the village and do several visits to explain, let's explain what breast cancer is. And the more that we can do that, starting with these younger generations of educating them, this is what cancer is, this is what breast cancer is, this is how treatment can be successful, and we help to build up that infrastructure, the more we're going to be able to make a difference with some of these cultural barriers that are holding people back from reporting a symptom, or the finances that make it difficult to report the symptom, all of those things. There's so many different components. And so I think it's so beautiful, the work that's being done to understand on a genetic genomic level what's happening, be able to distinguish how do we address all these different disparities. And so I'm just amazed at what women can do, you know, and I was, you know, watching that beautiful video, Ricky, of that woman saying, this thing happened to me. So then I turned around and thought, now I need to make sure everybody else has these resources, right? And this is like what Ricky has done. This is what all the women in this room are doing right now is, and men, is saying, I can do something in this space. I think I can take a step forward and change the future for somebody else. And this is why I have so much confidence that we're going to get there, because when we look at all the people in this room, there's a lot of power here in what we're doing and coming together. I'm just so grateful for Ricky and being such a magnet for that and a light for that, and bringing everyone together and doing such great work. So thank you for that, Ricky.
Thank you so much. We love the lemons, and we're going to take them to Africa the next time we go. You know, because I think it could be a really good tool for our advocacy team. So next we have a video, right? Of Lauren. Yeah, Lauren McCullough, she's on our soundbite team, but she's going to tell you if she is in her video. Her mom is sick, so she couldn't make it to San Antonio.
Feel like a DJ. DJ.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Lauren McCullough, and for almost 30 years, I've dedicated my work to understanding why cancer affects people differently, and more importantly, what we can do to make those differences disappear. Across all of my work, Bridge here in Georgia, Voices of Black Women at the American Cancer Society, and Team Standby across the African diaspora, one message comes up again and again. Your surroundings, your stress, your support system, and your access to care shape your cancer journey just as much as anything happening inside your body. Let me start with what we know. Cancer is not just about genes or biology. Where someone lives, the quality of the air they breathe, the stress they deal with every day, how easily they can get medical care, their experiences with racism and discrimination, and the strength of their community, all these things impact cancer risk, treatment, and survival. These real-life factors are at the heart of my work, and they're why I built programs, not just in my local state, Georgia, but across the country, and now with Standby across the world, to help address cancer inequities in a meaningful way. Bridge is where my journey started. In Georgia, we set out to understand why women were dying at higher rates of breast cancer who were Black compared to their white counterparts, even when they were diagnosed at the same stage and received the same treatments. Over time, Bridge has become a wide-reaching project that brings together medical records, environmental factors, neighborhood conditions, and most importantly, the stories and experiences of survivors. We've learned that things like air pollution, neighborhood resources, and long-term stress can play a real role in how women respond to treatment and how long they live. But numbers alone don't tell the whole story. We, along with 32 Black breast cancer survivors, have been fortunate to be able to understand the financial struggles of treatment, the emotional toll of navigating the health system, and the barriers Black women face, even those with good jobs, good insurance, and high education. Their voices have influenced our new research ideas, state cancer plans, and even national policy discussions. Because of them, Bridge is not just a research study, it is a movement for community-led change. Building on what Bridge taught us, I now serve as co-principal investigator of Voices of Black Women, which aims to be the largest study to understand Black women in the US. We aim to enroll 100,000 women from all 50 states to understand how lifestyle, stress, environment, discrimination, and neighborhood conditions affect cancer and other chronic conditions. We have already had 5,000 women join us, and almost half have chosen to share biologic specimens. When I speak to women across the country through media interviews, community events, churches, and advocacy groups, I hear some of the same things. Black women want research that reflects their reality. They want answers about why breast cancer deaths are still high, why uterine cancer deaths are rising so fast, and why higher income or education doesn't always protect them. Voices was built to answer these questions with strong science and true partnerships. And then, of course, there's Team Standby, a global project funded by the Cancer Grand Challenge. My role is to lead the work focused on social determinants of health. That's thinking about stress, environment, neighborhood, and experiences of discrimination, and how that shapes the experiences of what we hope to be 40,000 cancer survivors across 7 countries. We're connecting survivors across the African diaspora and asking the big questions. How do genetics and neighborhood conditions work together to impact long-term health? How does lifelong stress show up in the body over time? And how do systems and structures shape the survivor experience around the world? What ties these research programs together is the understanding that cancer disparities are not natural and they are not unavoidable. They come from systems, policies, environments, histories that have harmed Black communities for generations. And because these problems were created by systems, they can also be fixed by systems. But to change anything, we need data. We need stories, we need experiences, and we need truth from people that are most affected. Across my work, we are building platforms that will not only support today's research, but empower next generations of scientists and advocates fighting for health equity. So, when you talk about social determinants of health, we're not just talking about risk. We're talking about real conditions that shape people's lives. We're talking about power, opportunity, and the environments people are born into. We're talking about what strengthens health and what harms it. And we're talking about Black communities that have carried an unfair share of the cancer burden for far too long. My goal is to help create the evidence needed to spark change at every level. to improve policies, to guide care, to support survivors, and ultimately to ensure that where someone lives, the air they breathe, or the color of their skin no longer determines their cancer outcome. I want to thank Ricky and the Touch family for inviting me to share this work, and all of you for being partners in advancing cancer equity locally, nationally, and globally. Thank you.
Our last speaker is my dear friend Franz, from AstraZeneca. And, you know, all these women call me and say, can you help me do something? And so it always turns out to be a really cool thing. So we've been working together on an infrastructure that will help inform the UN. So here.
Thank you, Ricky, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate here today. So I'm going to talk about the policy and advocacy side of things. So we've heard a lot about science, which is amazing in terms of data matters, and we need it. And so what we're doing in our area, so as we've got obviously a big company and different departments in our area, it's about some of the things that have already been weaved into the conversation about the policies, about the systems, the infrastructure and things like that. So we launched 2 years ago in 2024, we launched the Global Breast Cancer Care Council. And that came after in 2023, we did a landscape analysis. We looked at a number of countries and wanted to know what's the lay of the land when it comes to breast cancer. What are governments doing about breast cancer? What are advocates advocating for in breast cancer? And what we found is that it's still the number 1 or 2 cancer killer of women in 95% of the countries, including high and low income countries. And so we said, well, we need to bring a group of experts together to help advise us on what we're going to focus on. So we launched the Global Breast Cancer Care Council, which is made up of patient advocacy groups. We have health economists, we have policy experts, we have breast cancer surgeons and oncologists. And we also have Her Excellency Toyin Saraki, who sits there from Nigeria. And we have Ricky, who's there representing the community. And we have Mary Jingo, I see her here too, from the Young Survival Coalition. And so we really want to make sure that we have the providing the table for the community to have a say in governance. So start at the governance level and also to co-create. So in terms of governance, having a seat at the table, you have a say in what the priorities are going to be, what the focus is going to be, what needs to be captured, what needs to be collected. In terms of the co-creation, it's the co-creation on what are the measures? What are the measures we need to look at? We hear of underserved populations everywhere. High-income countries have rural communities, and we've heard about this already. Rural and urban, very different in terms of the access to the type of access to care that they get. And so in terms of council, I can tell you that Ricky is a very strong advocate. She represents the community very well. We're very fortunate that she is with us and helping us, helping guide in terms of the work that we're doing. From the council, they decided, and it really is they established that there's 2 key priorities they really want to focus on. They said, you know, there needs to be a list of like quality standards that are available, and we know what they are everywhere in the world. And so we said, okay, let's look at building a quality index. So the breast cancer care quality index came to be, and it was actually published on September 1st on eCancer. And it actually helped to look at bridging. So you mentioned the WHO Global Breast Cancer Initiative. There's so much science, there's so much great research already out there that's done. But why is it that many of the countries aren't meeting those targets? So WHO Global Breast Cancer Initiative has a goal of reducing by 2.5% annually the mortality rate, which will lead to 2.5 million lives saved by 2040. But only 7 countries, approximately 7 countries, are meeting those targets. and the US is not one of them. So, like, there needs to be some work done. And, and so the quality index was published. And now we have a lot of activity in terms of disseminating that information. And it's bridging the global standards like WHO Global Breast Cancer Initiative, which has a lot of evidence behind it. Like, you've got great experts that have put a lot of effort and time into it, like Dr. Ben Anderson, who's been at this since like 1993, and so they've done a lot of great work, but how do we make it, bridge it so that it's happening locally? And what can we do to help support it locally? So that's the work that's going on right now in terms of the quality index. And then it's the council prioritized that. So that's out there now. And now the next phase is towards a UN or WHO resolution on breast cancer. Because that helps to make countries accountable to measure progress. They have to feed back into the UN. They have to feed that back in to say, what are they doing to help support that? So if we go back to the WHO Global Breast Cancer Initiative, the stage 1, 2, and 3 that you talked about, is like, so their key performance indicators. So there's 3 of them, 60, 68. So the 60% stage shift earlier. So 60% of your breast cancer is diagnosed at stage 1 and 2. And then the second pillar is around the diagnostics, the testing, within 60 days. So everything is done within 60 days. So we heard 2 years, and there's different reasons for that. And so one of the key things that we're working on, that we're pushing on our policies, some of the work that we're helping to work on is the reimbursing patient navigation services. Like, we know that patient navigation, there's evidence behind it. It supports patients through this very complex healthcare system. So you get your diagnosis and then you're facing the healthcare system, and so this really helps. And there's evidence behind it. So how can we promote policies that will actually support patients accessing the patient navigation services? What about, we heard about genetic testing, biomarker testing. That should be covered, and it should be provided annually. And it shouldn't matter where you live. You should have access to guideline concordant care, no matter who you are, where you live. We have rural communities. I said I was from Canada. We have rural communities in Canada that are not getting the care that they deserve. You're facing that in the US, you're facing that in all over the world. We've heard about Africa and, all over. So there's work to be done, but it takes a village. And it takes the right people at the table to help support that night. And we do have, there's a lot of, I think, through some of the experiences through COVID, it helped to enlighten us on that government can change when it needs to. It really can. And so sometimes it takes that to change it, but let's keep moving forward with the change and making sure that we have the people at the table. And yeah, so we're still charging ahead, and we're still working with Ricky and the community. So thank you again for inviting me to participate in this. Hopefully it's been helpful, and I look forward to continuing the efforts and growing the community for sure. Thank you.
Aren't they awesome? Oh, yeah. Anybody have any questions for our illustrious panel? Any questions? Any comments?
So it's about your women. I absolutely love that idea. What I struggle with is the U.S. task force, who does not believe that, doing self-breast exams or teaching women is the best way. I struggle with that across the board. So how do you reconcile that, especially if you're talking to a provider about implementing that? And we know that most breast cancers were discovered either by that person or significant other. But to say that when self-breast exams are taught, then it leads to needless biopsies, and women worry too much is not a good excuse, not to teach. So how do you reconcile this?
Thank you for that. There we go. Self-exam. Wow, I could talk for an hour about this. I'll shrink it down, but a couple of years ago, Irene, who's in the back of the room, she's VP of development with me. We went to an OBGYN conference and we had our 12 slides up and we're like, our app could teach you how to self-exam. And we had lots of gynecologists coming up to us and say, what's your stance on self-exam? And I'd say, we think women should know their bodies. And they'd be like, yes, like we agree with that too, right? But there's just not the evidence for that. And so the difficulty is that we cannot make health recommendations without good quality research. And the only randomized controlled trial for breast exams was done in China in the 90s with a very homogeneous population, right? And Ben, who was Ben Anderson, had a really good conversation with him about this. And he says, look, the point of that study was not to prove the efficacy of self-exam or not. What that study discovered was that particular group of women were very good at finding tumors under 2 centimeters because the average breast size in China is AA and A, right? So now we're taking that evidence and we're saying this applies to everyone in the world, right? And WHO in their latest thing, and my main goal in being in the WHO committee for that was, please say self-exam. Let's stop calling this breast awareness. We do not know what breast awareness means. We do not right? And so what happened was the medical community went, well, we can't say don't know your body, but we can't say self-exam because self-exam was like written up in that RCT. So let's call it breast awareness. So we say, don't self-exam, but practice breast awareness. And I said, what you are telling people when they hear that is, don't touch yourself, but know that your breast exists. Like, I'm aware, and when we talk about like breast cancer awareness, it's like, we know breast cancer exists now, but we are not educated about it, right? So let's get past breast cancer awareness. Let's get into breast health education and be like, how do we manage this beautiful organ throughout our life? Not just about cancer, but like breastfeeding and, like all of these things. And like, how do breasts change as you get older? And like, what does density mean? And like, we don't know any of this stuff because we are fragile creatures that need to be protected. And heaven forbid, if we start messing around here and we get worried that we found a lump, that anxiety is going to cripple us. So you know what? Don't worry about it. We have these fantastic machines that we've invented for you that are going to find all this for you. You won't get breast cancer before age 40. That's fine. We've said the wrong thing. So what we are saying is we're refusing to not say self-exam, and that has limited us in some funding from big funders because they say, we think your app is great. We see the evidence that people are finding breast cancer earlier. You call it self-exam and a randomized controlled trial, So we have been talking with some organizations about how can we do a new RCT on self-exam? And we can do it through the app because people are reporting how often they're doing self-exams. And we can say, hey, do you want to be part of this study? Just self-exam once a month if you can. That would be great. Just let us know. And if you're ever diagnosed, let us know. And if you're not, we have mechanisms that we didn't have in the 90s now to do that. And then also, let's change the definition of what self-exam means. Like, self-exam does not mean a hunt to find cancer. Self-exam means knowing what's normal for you. So if something does change, you're more able to spot it. So we're working on these two things at the same time. Let's change the definition of what self-exam means. And then let's get a new RCT so that we can stop arguing over the semantics of what we're calling touch yourself. So that is really like the stop-start thing that is a very, in my view, a ridiculous thing to keep us from moving forward and doing more early detection work.
I have a question because in Egypt, they did a lot of work on that, like Dr. Hisham Al-Ghazali through the presidential campaign, and they did they were able to show a stage shift, from stage 3 to 4 to stage 1 and 2 by doing that. And so I think there might be some connections there. I don't know if you've worked with them, but
Yeah, absolutely. So like the WHO recommends their pro self-exam. 90% of women in the world find breast cancer through self-exam. There's been a little change in semantics. They're like, well, if you find it accidentally, then that's not through self-exam. But if you found it through like a routine check, then we're calling that self-exam. So a lot of women are finding it accidentally, like in the shower or getting dressed or something. So yeah, but that's like, maybe accidentally you bump into it. If you're accidentally bumping into it, it's grown to a certain level that you're running into, right? You don't trip over a tiny thing on the carpet, you trip over it, right? So globally, WHO recommends self-exam, but they say in places where screening is available, screening's more effective. And it kind of goes back to this benevolent sexism of, if we teach women to do self-exam, then they'll probably think they don't need a mammogram because look, I'm not feeling anything, so I don't need to check. It's like, no, then we educate and we explain what a mammogram is for and when it's useful, right? So what's kind of happened is, instead of saying, oh, this is an area where we need to do more education and educate women about the difference between what a breast lobe feels like versus a cancerous lump. Like, teach them anatomy, teach why screening is important and how it can find something before you can feel it or see it, or whatever. Then we say we should just recommend against it and then not educate about it and not talk about it because it'll be too hard to explain or too hard to understand, or women will get anxious or whatever. So we're looking, we can change this now. We don't talk this way about women anymore, but these policies are very much set in this kind of old way of thinking about worrying about women's anxiety. And we can change that.
I just wanted to add, and it's not a random controlled trial, but it is like data that we see, which is that in terms of like the opposite end of the spectrum, so screening through mammographies, there's this sort of consideration for Black women, for instance, that there's this notion that we don't screen enough, but health services data actually says that Black women screen more than white women. But when we look at screening data, so we have a study where we looked at screen detected and non-screen detected cancers. Those non-screen detected cancers were the ones where women came into the clinic compelled. Maybe they weren't doing a breast exam, but they were interval cancers, meaning they're part of a screening, but before they could get to their next mammogram, they found something. And so a large portion, especially of aggressive breast cancer types, it grows really quick. And so self-exams and those intervals of mammography are really key to know that I can't wait till my next mammography, right? I need to go in now. So I don't know if that helps, cause, but I think that's maybe some other information that should be considered.
Or what's happening in Africa where, they do feel a lump and they don't do it. Because they don't have the money, or they're just afraid, right, to do that cancer's gonna, because when you say cancer, it means you're gonna die. And then their village is gonna shun them, their family's gonna put them out or whatever. So I think that there's so many factors here. But at the end of the day, it's really about education and educating women and letting them, giving them the tools they need to be able to help themselves and know, when to go to the doctor, when to do this, when to take care of it. One of the things we learned in Ghana too is that a woman will find a lump, but it doesn't hurt. So it doesn't hurt, so maybe it's not so bad, can't be really mean anything because it doesn't hurt. And then when it hurts, they're medicine, right? That's when they go to the doctor. So there's so many, cultural nuances and, just different ways people are thinking about it. It's just, that doesn't need to happen with education. So any questions, anybody? So this is our party though.
The thoughts are, if your hormone is positive, that, that's what has that you're gonna be okay, but that's not.
Yeah.
So I wish Lauren was live because this is something that she actually looks at very carefully. So one of the things she mentioned in her brief video was that when we look at African American women who are getting diagnosed with what she calls treatable cancers, those are hormone receptor positive cancers, and they're being diagnosed at relatively earlier stages, but the treatments don't actually follow through in the same way. And on top of that, what we see when we look at the molecular signature, so this gets too deep in, I know Ricky's about to say, well, what does that mean? She gives me all the time. So one of the things we look at when we, so besides hormone receptor positivity, which is just that one biomarker, right? So you're looking for ER status or PR status or HER2 status by using like an antibody that just, makes it visible, right? So within that context, there's still a spectrum of the different varieties of ER positive cancers. And so when we look at all of the genes and the expression across that dynamic, and we find like a profile, which means maybe it's 200 or 50 genes, right? That are expressed in a unique way, that tells us something about what's driving the biology of the cancer beyond the hormone signal, because not all of, so here's the other thing, ER status is a percentage, right? So if you have a percentage of cells that are ER positive, then you're ER positive. So that drug will treat that percentage of ER positive tumor cells, but then the rest of the tumor is still kind of proliferating on it, on whatever else it's feeding off, right? So we think this heterogeneity within the tumor also tells us something about Black women and what's driving a larger sort of component, if you will, of their tumor. So what she's seen is that the therapies don't work as well, but we also know that there's more adverse events that are related to the treatment itself that are more prevalent in Black women. And this is because it wasn't designed or trialed in our population to really capture some of those treatment related adverse events. So yes, there's an underlying signature, and here's a kicker. There's like a test, a genomic test, several of them that I shall not name right now because I don't know what my disclosures are for this event. But when we look at those specific genes that are in the profiler, there are nuances to how it's expressed at a population level. So whether you know it or not, right? So my ER gene may have a different regulation switch from someone else's. And all of our genes are like that. All of our genes have the propensity to have a unique regulation switch. And some of those genes that are in those sort of calculators don't take into an account the genetic background that dictates what your regulation switch is. And so that means the results of that algorithm are skewed. And so we're starting to pay attention to that more because there have been too many people saying, you need to include diversity. And so now they're including diversity and they see this doesn't actually replicate in not just Black women, but Asian women, South American women, Caribbean women. And then they go backwards and say, well, let's create a calibration for this population. When really, I think the approach should be, let's just study this in the population and create a different test, right? That captures that genetic background. Not to say that we need a test for every population, but that we need to include every population in the data so that we know what the appropriate set of genes are for any given individual. Yeah. But yeah, so for the ER positive, there are definitely different subtypes of luminal status that we see more prevalent in Black.
Did you guys understand? Sorry. After doing it in this space for 30 years and seeing the difference. Hearing all of these things Black, so like, okay, I don't want to continue hearing this Black condition, but when I deal with women that are needing assistance, somebody that's not Black, I'm getting stage 1, stage 2. And then when I get kind of Black, stage 3, patient or the world? I mean, I think, more like this to educate them. I think more forums like this, we can talk to people, but, we talk to patients every day. In our business, we have a new customer every day. What time is it? How many already got the My Chart today saying, yes, you're diagnosed?
Yeah.
Right? And so we have this influx of people every day with this disease. I think we just have to make sure that they're equipped. And I mean, that's most of the work we do. They call me, I call her. And I talk to them and say, how can we help you? And help them get through it. But until we have better services, and frankly, at the end of the day, it's going to be better treatments.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be the treatment. We're going to be Black women in trials, making drugs better and work on blood. And that's going to take a while, but I think we have to just keep enrolling women into trials. I mean, our When We Trial campaign now, it'll be 4 years old at the end of January. We've now enrolled 31,000 Black women into our portal. Not enough. It's not enough. And no one can tell me what that 31,000 is relative to in terms of the number of women who are dying or being affected. So I've heard her in trials. So I think we have to just work at it and keep educating people and keep trying to help them understand. And also keep talking to our pharma partners. Thank you so much for coming, you guys. Talking to everybody about how we can bring, do a better job here because, we're dying. Yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question.
I mean, one of our approaches is, like you said, education. But we step outside of the cancer circle, we go to more general practitioners. Right? So that's where women start. Typically, if they're not in screening with, I have an issue, especially in our healthcare system, depending on your insurance, you have to go back to your general practitioner to get a referral if you're asking for something outside of whatever. Whatever the guidelines are. I remember having this argument facing down my doctor. I said when I was turning 30, like, I think I have a lump in my breast. I want a mammography. Oh, you just have dense breasts, it's him talking me out of it. And I was like, okay, so let me reintroduce myself. I am a scientist and I have a reason why I want to do this. And so they were like, well, you have to pay for out of pocket. I was like, okay, just hand me their referral so I can get in here and get it done. Right. But I'm a different person. Right. And if I don't advocate for myself, then, but how many women know to do that? They go to a general practitioner and that doctor says, you're just worried, or you need to just calm down, we'll do it when it's time. You know what I mean? And so I think education at that level. We talk about outreach and patient education, but we do some in-reach as well, trying to re-educate our clinicians that the population that you serve doesn't fit the textbook that you were taught when you were at that time. So we have to reevaluate what you should be telling.
Yeah, we just put a gynae on our medical advisory board because we figure out the gynaes are the ones diagnosing or finding the lumps, right? We also just put a pediatrician on our medical advisory board. I have this incredible board of 20 Black women doctors who are all badasses. But I said, you know what? Like I saw Haley going to the pediatrician with her baby, right? Now, whatever, baby's 9 years old. So whereas a mom, that mom is thinking she should be getting screened. I mean, I think that's what moms are thinking about health for the first time, women, whatever age, 20, late 20s, early 30s, right? So is there a sign in the office that explains what a clinical trial is? That it talks about screening. So I think any place we can intervene. And, I like to say we go where Black women live, work, play, pray, and display. You don't go there. We go into the community, we go to Martha's Vineyard, Black School. We go, we go wherever we have to go in the community and talk to women when they're not thinking about health and catch them off guard and educate. But that's how we, kind of get the word out every day. So, and you're going to keep talking.
For my panelists, actually.
I know, I'm hoping that, like, you guys are all this.
I already asked her some questions about the limits. I mean, but what about pregnant women who are breastfeeding? Like, what are the guidelines for screening during that period of time? Is there like a quality of care for, breastfeeding women or pregnant women specifically?
I don't know. I think that we have so many women though who are diagnosed nursing
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think there needs to be a study. Yeah, yeah, okay. I think that's something we need to study, yeah.
Yeah.
We're good about the hour. Any more questions, you guys?
Okay.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Talk about how fear that's, been a barrier for a lot of people.
Please do our survey before you leave, you guys. Please do our survey before you leave.
Talk about fear and. About. And a method, along with researchers, overcome the fear barrier. I so recently at a conference with Native Americans in Canadian American. And the nurse navigator had breast cancer and she was afraid to get her test. And she highly educated, like our spirit said, highly educated breast cancer researcher knows what the standards of care. She knows what she would do. She still encountered that fear within her. Tell me a little bit. I know you've done a great work, you know, what you've done is bringing in 30,000 people into a new trial. How do we get beyond that here so we have not just 30,000?
Every day. I mean, I think, I wish I could answer that. I mean, I think that's why it's so important for us to keep doing this work. I mean, the more people we touch, the more, but until we touch them, they won't, and they'll still live in their bias. So I think we just all have to keep working harder and reaching more people and being where they are, and they're not gonna come to us. Exactly. So I think all of us in everything that we do, we have to meet them where they are, wherever that is, and find them and educate them and help them get the information they need. I mean, I don't know if it's the right answer to that. I think it's like, you know, we can't not do enough. I know that, you know, Sue's in the community out every day. You guys are in the community every day. We're all doing this work. Desiree's in the community every day. We're all, you know, Lindsay's in the community every day doing this work. So we have to keep doing it and talking to women, and hopefully they'll tell two friends and they'll tell two friends. But, you know, we have to just stay out there.
And we have to make it not so mystical.
Yeah.
We have to normalize it, even to the point of the Tylenol that you take, that you take is on a clinical trial. And explain even over-the-counter medications, don't have representative numbers. So maybe the 2 tablets every 4 hours that's prescribed, and then you take 1 every 6, because our bodies are different. But we have to do it at every touch place, even the pastor, where sometimes people tell the pastor before they tell their families that they have cancer. What's the pastor say after he prays? He says, call touch.
Yeah, we're doing a campaign right now called After You Pray, What Do You Say? So we're gonna help them get them, to the right information.
I just want to give a round of applause to our amazing panelists. Thank you. Thank you very much. Also, thank you for taking a brief moment to complete those surveys to let us know how great we did. Yeah, this was an incredible conversation. I think it's planted many seeds in many ways. So we're very excited for what's to come about global work and changing the world. Sandby is changing the world. Northern Lemons is changing the world. France is changing the world. If you didn't take a moment to be a scientist and step into our touch lab over there for a closer look at the cells that Ricky showed on the screen. Please take the bags. I know you have a few. They're great for shopping. But we do have some newer flyers in there, so maybe some things you haven't seen before. And I know everybody to go to the next place, but we thank you for being here with us today. We hope that you enjoyed and you learned something new. And love to hear what you're going to do to change the world. Ricky, anything?
Yeah. Stay on that ladder. Don't go back into the box.
I'm coming in for a picture.
Thanks for joining us.